Alrighty, welcome to everyone that is here. If you've made it to this point, you are at Chaff Flower, a fast-moving invader with our wonderful speaker, Nick. Nick Seaton is with us. I will be moderating the talk today. My name is Jessica Teggy, and I am Restoration Program Projects Manager for Ohio River Foundation. Which is one of the organizations that is putting on today's discussion. The other organization is CISMA, so that stands for Ohio River Valley Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area. Really quick before I let Nick do his thing, we'll talk about what is CISMA. It's basically a coalition of nonprofit organizations, of agencies, of businesses, that are working to control and remove invasive species in a 22-county area in the Ohio River Valley. Basically, the idea is because invasive plants are expanding rapidly across all areas, the more people, the more different types of people that we join together, we are a little bit easy. It's easier to really target those guys and manage them efficiently. So Ohio River Foundation, my organization, we focus on education, restoration, and advocacy. So we have a few of our education programs that are rather successful in this area. We've been around for about 20 years. Nonprofit agency focused on those three topics there. We work in areas in Greater Cincinnati and Greater Columbus and even down in Lexington. Since 2005, ORF has reached over 50,000 students between our two educational programs. So we have some pictures here. We have our Muscles in the Classroom program, and then we also have our River Explorer program. One's obviously in the field, one's obviously in the side of the classroom. So the teachers we work with are able to kind of choose what works best for them. Through our restoration program, ORF is able to restore about 20 acres of land every year, which fosters native animal and plant populations. And if you're interested in volunteering with us anytime, please check out our calendar. That's on our website at ohioriverfdn.org. We would love to have you. There's a picture in the bottom right-hand corner of some of our awesome volunteers that helped us out at Kingswood Park recently. But without further ado, it is time for what everyone came here for. Chaff Flower, a fast-moving invader with Nick Seaton. So Nick Seaton is our presenter. He's currently the project coordinator for the River to River Cooperative Weed Management Area in the Shawnee National Forest. He received his bachelor's in forestry and his master's in plant biology from Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. His past work experience is with the Nature Conservancy on the invasive species strike team, where he managed invasive species across the Shawnee National Forest for 3 years. And he is currently an at-large board member of the local and state Illinois Native Plant Society. If you have any questions during this presentation, we're asking you to just put them in the chat and we will answer them that way. Alrighty. Nick, if you are ready, you are good to go.
Share my screen here. Presentation mode. Okay, is that coming through all right?
It is.
All right, well, thanks for having me, everyone. And welcome to the Chaff Flower presentation. So we'll be talking about this new invasive species called Japanese chaff flower, Acaranthes japonica. And just for a little outline of what we're going to be covering, I'm just going to hit on what is Japanese chaff flower and what are the negative effects of chaff flower growing outside of its native range, how you can manage chaff flower if it's growing in your woods, and then also some resources for you to learn some more about chaff flower too. And some background on the organization I work for, the River to River Cooperative Weed Management Area. This was first established in 2006 and has since had a full-time project coordinator. So I'm in that position now. And I've been in this position now for about 3 years. Like the ORV CISMA, it's a group of partners. So we have partnerships with 13 federal and state agencies, not-for-profit organizations, also universities like SIU, and DNR and Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife Service. We have quite a few different agencies that we get to work with. And all these projects that we work under are with the Shawnee Resource Conservation and Development. And so that's a not-for-profit organization that we run our grants through, and they do our fiscal management too. And the objectives of the River Cooperative Weed Management are education and awareness. So that's kind of like what we're doing right now. We also have booklets on management of invasive plants and how to ID them on our website. That's rtrcwma.org. We're working with organization and capacity building, helping our partners manage the invasive issues that they have a little bit easier, maybe with tactics that they can approach the infestations with, or new techniques that we find along the way. Same with the coordinated control efforts. And then we do research also on various species that come into the invasion range in Southern Illinois down here. And here's where the river CWMA exists. So in the southern 11 counties in Illinois, you can see all the other CWMAs that are kind of scattered around throughout there. And so that's some background on where we're at down in Southern Illinois. And now we can hit on Japanese chaff flower. So this is a specimen sample, and we'll get into the, so we're going into the first tab of the outline. So this is a specimen sample from the Japan flora. This is an actual specimen sample here. And so Japanese chaff flower is a perennial herbaceous plant. So perennial meaning that it's going to live every single year. It has underground roots, so it persists year to year. And it's native to Japan, China, and parts of Korea. And this is an interesting, this is kind of interesting here too. This is actually how you spell Japanese chaff flower in Japanese. And so if you copy and paste that into Google Scholar, it ends up giving you a whole new slew of interesting research papers. So it's kind of a cool way to, these invaders that come over here, it's a cool way to get some interesting research that's been done actually in its home range. And so that's kind of how I found, that's how I did some of my research for this presentation here. You can see, so here's where we are. Well, most we're around here. And so it's growing pretty much, it grows really on the same latitude as us. And that's kind of the same story with a lot of these invasive species. They're growing in a lot of the same climates, same latitudes. So they experience a lot of the same environmental conditions. And these are actually pictures of it growing in China. So off the side of the road, just kind of growing off on the side of the road. And here's an interesting thing too. This is Japanese chaff flower growing with Chinese yam. So two of our invaders that we have here growing together in their native habitat. It's an interesting photo. So within Japan, or within its native range, it's listed as just a common species. And it grows in the woods, lowlands, and hills. So a lot of these same areas that it's currently invading too. And when it was first described by Medley when it was discovered in Kentucky, this Medley paper is the actual person who described it when it first came into the States here in Kentucky. And so he actually categorized it as the variety Hachioensis. So it's the variety with more lustrous and maybe shinier leaves. So a lot of times you'll end up seeing it with kind of glossy looking leaves. And the dispersal mechanisms for Japanese chaff flower are epizoochory, so that's on animals. and then also waterways too. And so with the epizoochory, so there's previous studies that have noted that browse of form has been seen on the plants that are growing here. So I did a study on deer browse on it, and also somebody else had noted that animals had been passing through the populations and browsing on it too. Well, this is similar with where it's in its native range too. On storm petrels, there's a study that found that chaff flower seeds had been attached to the wings of storm petrels. And one in extreme case, it actually entangled them to death. It was just an extreme infestation of chaff flower. Here over here, the deer fur, a paper Neil had actually drugged deer fur through chaff flower infestations to see how much of it would actually stick to the fur. In Japan, macaw monkeys have been noted to be browsing on it. So you can imagine that fur could probably carry quite a few of these barbs. And then just my own personal observations with my dog hiking, end up seeing him end up get a little bit of chaff flower seeds on him too. So something to be on the lookout for. And as I had said before, this Medley paper had found the original population was actually off the Tug Fork River. So I have a map of that too, where it kind of puts things into perspective of where we're at now. This photo here has 2 generations actually. So this is actually like two generations of growth right side by side. So this was last year's thatch growing alongside this year's plants. And so you have all the seeds from last year and all the new growth from this year kind of all intermingled with each other. So we're going to go into a little bit of identification of chaff flower now, and just how, if you end up seeing it, because it kind of has this, this look where it's like, oh, that's just another plant. It's kind of like just that other plant looking plant. So, starting off, it has simple leaves. So this is a simple leaf here with oblong, elliptic, or obovate shapes. So that would kind of be any of this kind of oblong or elliptic. It can kind of get a little skinnier and kind of get a little wider, but generally that's the shape that it takes. Acuminate tip. So right here, that's an acuminate tip. And smooth margins, so there's no serrations or teeth on the margins or anything like that. It's all smooth on the margins. And then when you look at the nodes, or the area where each of the leaves come out, there is red coloration at the nodes. And so that would be right there. So here's what a plant looks like just all by itself. You can see the simple leaf with an acuminate tip, and right there's the nodes there, a little bit of red coloration right there, and they're oppositely arranged too. Once it goes through maturity and flowers and puts on some fruits, it makes these little barbs. So they're referred to as subulate bracteoles, or little Velcro barbs. And so that would be that little part right there. And that's actually the part that sticks to fur and clothing. And so that's this is maybe a little, probably right after flowering. And this is after a full year of being out. So they're all dried up now and have actually gone through a full winter too. So it's noticed as an invasive species in Martin County and was in 1981, and the paper was published in 1985. And so it was found Martin County, Kentucky, and off the Tug Fork River. So this is the Tug Fork River, and it comes all the way down out from also the Big Sandy River, which flows out of the Ohio River. And this is the outline of the Tug Fork again. And notice the distribution of chaff flower, it matches that, very similar, and just rode along the Ohio River, all these known locations down into southern Illinois, and then probably, now we're kind of seeing it starting to go down this way and probably fill in parts of this area too. There's also been a found location over in Ontario, on an island in Ontario. So that's a large span of space to travel, and probably a bird of some sort had it on its wing. So the known natural checks, this is kind of some of that research I had found by actually putting the spelling of it in Japanese and Google Scholar. And so we have this gall-laying moth that not only uses stems of Japanese chaff flower, but also once they emerge, they eat the leaves off of the plants too. So that's a known check in its native range. It's not found here though, but it is something that keeps it in check. And then a Cercospora fungus. And so this was actually, in this study, did have quite a bit of damage done to it, to the leaves, and was pretty detrimental to its growth. Okay, so going into this next subject here, what are the negative effects of chaff flower growing outside of its native range? So I took this picture earlier. This is at a park, actually, and you can see chaff flower. This is like a public park where people come and walk their animals, and it's right along the Ohio River. So this is the Ohio River in the background there. And here's a whole bunch of chaff flower growing off on the side. And look at, you can see there's a mow line where they're just mowing right up to it, but all these little plants are right below it. As you could imagine, people walking their animals past and just brushes against it. It's really easy to get just a few seeds attached to fur or clothing, or the mower throwing seeds even further. So there's all sorts of different options for the seed to be able to spread. Okay, and so we'd already kind of talked about that was noted as an invasive in '81. So that was first time in 1981 we found it in Kentucky. In 1998, this Vincent and Cusick paper was published, and they had said that this was a kind of raising the flags that there was a new exotic invader in the States, in Kentucky. And then from 1998 to 2011, this paper was published, Evans and Taylor, in Southern Illinois. So from 81 to 2012, it had made this entire distance here. This study here was talking about the overcompensation of Japanese chaff flower if it were to be browsed by animals. So overcompensation, saying that it's able to kind of, it's like when you prune a bush and expect it to get bushier, it's able to do that too. Not only that, but it also has highly variable growth between sites. So this study found that most of the plants that did best were actually on the drier sites. So some of the driest sites were doing best, and the wetter sites seem to have a much harder time growing. So that's chaff flower plants were growing much shorter. Neal found that the tallest plants produced the greatest number of seeds and also had the greatest degrees of branching. And that also supports what I had seen too when I was doing this, my deer browse studies, that a lot of the tallest plants also were producing the greatest amount of seed. But that the plants that were browsed were producing similar or insignificant differences between the growth of the plants. This can easily grow in public areas like parks and trails. Here's another one of those shots where they're mowing right up against it. There's no real known evidence of any pathogens that have been noted so far, like the Cercospora or the moths that feed on them or anything. So they don't really have any checks that have been noted yet. And they also go through these continual germination flushes, which could kind of make it difficult for management. If you end up spraying it once or removing it once, you're going to have another flush throughout the year again, and then sometimes up to two to three flushes. So it can make it really difficult. You have to re-enter the same site many times. Not only that, but the seeds has high fecundity, so seeds are very viable. It's able to reproduce very easily. And in this study here, the Schwartz 2016 paper, it was competing with these other Amaranthaceae family species that are agricultural weeds. So it was toe to toe with them, and actually grows on agricultural edges. So it could end up being something that farmers are having to manage for too in their soybean fields. And it was actually in a competition with glycine max, which is a soybean. Another one of these pictures of the Ohio River in the background with just like a silent invader waiting to put on seed for the year and drop them into the Ohio River. And this is kind of what these flushes look like too. This is what the ground had looked like right after, so it had been mowed down, and then another flush came up. So it's extremely dense. This is basically the only thing that's growing is Japanese chaff flower in this photo here. Just another example of what an infestation can look like. Real dense patches held off, probably being held off by tree of heaven though. So another invader. This was a pretty invaded area. And this is what it looks like in the wintertime too. So all that winter thatch ends up drying up, and these areas become really, really difficult to work in, because when you come out, you are completely covered in seeds, and it's sticking to your clothing and your coats and gloves, shoes. It's all over the place. So these are really areas that you want to try to avoid actually during the winter time, because you're not really able to do much management for it either. And so it's kind of starting to close off some parts of your woods if you want to keep them healthy, or else you're going to end up pulling seeds off you all the time, or end up spreading it all over your woods. Or you could imagine too, something that maybe hunters should think about too is, because this is in seed during hunting season. So going through them without the without the knowledge that it's being spread, just maybe relaying the message to hunters, that would be a good way to do this too. All right, now that got us to how can you manage for chaff flower if it's growing in your woods. So if you end up having it, now we've got the skills to identify it, and now we know we got it. So if you're able to, go ahead and hand pull it. If it's a first time, if you just found a small patch, you don't need to start using chemical right off the bat or anything. And you can maybe wait after a rain and the soil's soft, and see if you can get the whole plant and the roots and all, and if it's small enough infestation. Now, if it was some of those spots that I had just shown earlier, you might want to go to something a little bit heavier handed. Mowing it down, it can delay flowering and fruiting, but that's a really short-term plan. So that would be something that would be like maybe weed whacking it late in the season if you weren't able to get to it that year. So you can beat it before it goes to seed and fruit that year. But really something that would be translocating throughout the plant for larger infestations would be a good way to manage for it. And so there's two treatments that you can use. There's glyphosate, which is a non-selective herbicide, and then triclopyr, which is a broadleaf specific herbicide. And both those can be used at a 2% mix. This would be from emergence to seed production. So it's from May all the way to September. So we're still within that treatment calendar right now. And we also have this Phenologic treatment calendar here, which is online. This is in the management guide booklet too, which is on the CWMA website. And you can see has all of these invasive species listed with the different treatments that can go along with it. And so you can see with Japanese chaff flower, the treatment window goes from May to about the center of September or so, with those two different treatments that I had mentioned. And then when you do approach an infestation, you have 2 spots to choose, say. You would want to focus on some of these satellite populations first and the outliers. Work on those first, and then you can start at the edge of the larger infestations and work inward. And that can kind of prevent you from getting so much seed attached to you if you were dealing with an area that had that 2 generations of growth where some of the thatch from last year was still hanging in there. If you're working from the edge, you won't have to do that. And another thing too is actually working on the infested areas last. So some of these, so it's the last thing you do, so that when you move on to the other parts of your property or go home or something, you can immediately get it off. You don't have to go all the way traversing all the other hills and valleys of your property and spreading it everywhere else. And just safety. If you are using chemical, wear gloves, long sleeve, shoes. I'm assuming he has shoes. These aren't just cut off shorts or cut off jeans or anything. Eye protection, a hat. Just be safe. Read the label, and make sure you understand like how to mix it and everything too. We also have a mixing guide on the website too that can help you with the some of the math that's involved with making sure you have the percents all correct. And if you want to learn more, we are having a Chaff Flower Summit here in the next month, which is August 12th through the 13th. And I can send you the registration info that you can relay over to the participants today. And we'll have speakers talking about how they're managing their chaff flower infestations across the invasion range, and speakers also talking about the more in-depth research. They'll hit on some of the same stuff that I had talked about, but talk about it in more detail. And so this will be August 12th through the 13th. The 12th will be the in-class portion, and the 13th will be these field tours. And some of the field tours will be virtual, so you'll be able to, say, attend an infestation tour over in Georgia if you wanted to, and see what it looked like over there, or tour it over here in Southern Illinois and what it looked like over here, and just kind of connect everybody that's being infested with this right now, get them all together so that we can talk about ways to manage for it. So we're kind of still in that ERR stage, even though it's pretty far spread, and we're like 20 years into since introduction, or 30 plus years now. So, but it's really started to become an issue. Here's some other resources too. These are, chaff flower will be on these, but these are for invasive species in general too. Invasives.org, MidwestInvasivePlantNetwork.org. This is our website here. Wild Spotter. The Wild Spotter is kind of tailored to the public for national forests. So if you're living in a national forest, it'll actually give you the option as a pull down for your forest that you're in, and the botanists from that area are usually spoken to beforehand. And then also the EdMaps too. So EdMaps and Wild Spotter really work together hand in hand. is all the literature cited from the talks. That this is everything that we just talked about today. And I have this in a Word document too. I can share with you if you'd like to look at some of these studies. They're pretty interesting studies too. And some of them have, this is the life history of Japanese chaff flower, which is a really helpful paper. It's got great resources. And so I can send that Word document or put it into the chat box for you all, and whatever is easiest really.
Yeah, if you wanted, Nick, if you just sent that to me, I could send it with a thank you.
Okay, yeah,
Email.
I'll do that. Perfect.
Cool.
So yeah, with that, I can take any questions. We can put them in the chat box.
And maybe Nick, maybe you mentioned it, but can you remind us how tall is chaff flower, like, and maybe leaf size? What should we look for?
Oh yeah, so height can vary. The plants can grow up to about 7 feet tall in some cases, where they're 6 to 7 feet tall. But in general, they'll grow up to about your hip or your waist or so. And the leaves are about, the size of, they're probably about 6 inches long by 4 inches wide. So yeah, that's about the size of the plants.
And if anybody has any more questions, just drop those in the chat. We have a few more minutes here. I had one. What do you personally wear in the field when you're working, surveying, to try to reduce the seed spread?
Oh, rubber boots is good. So you can wear rubber boots so the seeds aren't really attached to that very much. And I have like this, it's kind of like it's not cotton, it's not polyester either. It's just like a mix between the two. So they're just my regular field clothes really. I have it takes a long time just to like check yourself though after you come out in the field. So inevitably you're going to end up with like a few seeds that stick to you. But I'm like kind of juking and jiving through the woods to make sure I can dodge them as much as I can, you know. And when if I do have to go through a plant, I usually pull the seeds off like right then, so that they're just kind of right where they were already. Exactly. Yeah, what David said. It's slick fabric. Yeah, that's like what the shirt that I wear is out in the field. It's not quite, the seeds don't want to stick to it that good. And also I wear the rubber boots too. If I'm spraying with chemicals or anything, it's just easier. So I don't have to wear my leather boots out in the woods.
Do we know what the seed survival rate is?
No, actually, I was trying to find something that was talking about like the seed bank, and I could not find any studies that are talking about seed longevity in the seed bank or anything like that. It's a really good, I think that'd be a really good one to get a research started on, because it would be a multi-year study, I'm sure. See if, and that might be one of the reasons we don't know yet, is because it's a kind of a new invader, so it still needs a subject to be studied. Yeah, I'm not sure if that was. I'm not sure if that Chris Evans paper was published or not, or if he ended up writing anything on it after all. I'll have to ask him. Maybe he's got some jars, or maybe he's got some seeds in the ground still that he's just waiting. There's, we're not sure yet. No wildlife damage. The Fish and Wildlife Service was given a pile of seeds when they do their wing days, and they were asked to keep an eye out for any chaff flower seeds that were potentially found on any of those wings, and they did not find any. Actually, we were suspecting that they would find some seeds of some chaff flower, and they ended up not finding any. So that's a good thing, I guess.
Nick, are you finding that chaff flower is competing with several other invasive species? Or I know you mentioned one.
The majority of the associates so a couple of those studies had almost identical associates from the plants that were growing alongside it. One was stilt grass, it's a microstegium, and so that's a pretty terrible invader. Pilea, which is clearweed, so that's kind of interesting. But that's a native species though. And then there was Virginia creeper, which is kind of just an everywhere plant, kind of another common, just it's all over the place. So those were like the three main associates that were always found with chaff flower. And so one of them is one of our worst invaders we got, which is the stilt grass. It's basically found everywhere, and it's in very disturbed areas too.
What about burn treatments? Any luck with that?
Yes. So on first entry, I should have included fire on this talk. You're right. So on first entry, it was actually depleted pretty good. There is a paper called, Gary is the author, with Ruffner. Gary and Ruffner is the paper. And on first entry was really hit hard, but it grew back quite a bit after that year after the fire. So one fire got it, maybe 2 fires in a row, but it was a master's thesis. So it was a 2-year study. I think if it was extended, that might have been maybe multiple entries over the time, could have even knocked it back further year after year. Yeah, it seems like girls will report it. Oh yeah, it does. Reported. I've seen it with that a lot too over here. I probably looked like at some points looked like Tom Hanks' Castaway in the woods. Sometimes I would go out there in Crocs and shorts so that I could avoid like running shorts and Crocs just to avoid spreading seed, and just bring a comb for your leg, you know.
Well, last chance for any questions. Drop them in there. No, such an interesting tactic you mentioned, like talking to hunters, because yeah, that is prime time when people are trekking in there, you know, full of warm gear and stuff that those seeds can just snatch on, grab onto, and then, gosh, sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, yeah. It's I would suspect I would guess that a lot of the spots that had it originally could have been, you know, hunters might be accidentally spreading it, not knowing it though. That's get an eye for them.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Well, if there are any further questions down the road, feel free to, you know, contact Nick if there are questions about or CISMA or Ohio River Foundation. Shoot me an email. I will be sending out a thank you letter, and I will include all of Nick's information. Awesome. And sources and papers as well.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah, well, thanks for having me too. This has been a really good time. It's been a fun presentation to put together too.
Yeah, thank you so much. Very interesting. I agree. All righty. And I will talk to everyone later on. So have a good rest of your day. Thank you, Nick.
All right. You have a good one. I'll see you later.
All right. See ya.